Good morning, everybody. Ani, I'll let you take it from here, Ani.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, bienvenidos. We're gonna wait for 1 more minute to connect, and then we begin. Just while you guys are here, if you can please rename yourself, placing your cohort number in front of your name, that will be awesome. There will be a slide that will tell you that. Thank you, Caroline. And if you have doubts on what your cohort number is, you can send me a direct message. I will check for you right after I finish the introduction, okay? Well, welcome everybody. We are on week 2. And this is going to be a lot about numbers, okay? So remember to rename yourself with your cohort number. Then we can go to the next slide, please. Before, remember that this is being recorded. Only the main sessions are recorded. Every breakout session is private. We want to thank our sponsors. We have Ruby Porter, News Marketing, Solar Whitham, and Binu Creative. These are our in-kind sponsors, and they are providing some prizes for graduation. And we will talk about that as we move forward. But right now, I want to highlight that Ryan Ripp, a lawyer, has offered a 1-hour consultation free of charge to members of this program. So here is the link to connect to him. I will also write this link on the chat. And I will send it on an email as well. So yay! We want to thank our cohort facilitators as well. Here they are. I'm not going to name them so we can move forward and continue this. We want to thank our cohort mentors. You're welcome to ask them questions and connect with them at any time to clarify any doubts that you have. Now, this week, we're going to be talking about pricing for profit, revenue projections, and market sizing made easy. These are numbers. Sometimes you can have the perception that they're complicated, but today it's going to be easy and you're going to be able to apply all of this knowledge to your business. And I didn't realize this slide has a whole bunch of animations, so it's going to take a little bit. That way you guys get excited about what's coming.
I think a good thing to mention here too is that, as Ani has shared, week 9, we have someone teaching augmented reality and marketing, but also we're going to allow you guys to pick who the other speaker is, probably by around week 5. So we'll have a survey that goes out that asks you what other digital marketing topic do you want, or a deeper dive into one of the other ones that we may have already addressed.
And if you guys already know, feel free to send me an email so we can take that into account. So today's agenda, these first 5 minutes are going to be the welcome. Then we're going to have Caroline present on revenue projections and market sizing. Then we have a short Q&A. Then comes Raj presenting on pricing for profit, another Q&A, and then we come in and do next steps. There will be some tags for you to apply this knowledge this week, and you will get all of that information. But this time, we're not going to have a breakout session, so we can have more time learning about these numbers. A few things to remember. We have mentor hours with Raj this Friday at 4 p.m. We are going to record it, so if you cannot connect, send your answers, your questions beforehand so we can answer them. If you haven't already, join our Facebook group. It is private and we are always posting all of the content that we are sharing here over there. Although you will get an email with all of this information as well. And we are also uploading the recordings to the YouTube channel. And there is the link as well. A lot of you have been asking about not being able to attend the main session. Don't worry. We just ask you that you watch the recording and email me 3 takeaways that you get from that session. This is a requirement for you to be able to graduate and compete for those awesome prizes that we have for you. And then one more thing that I would like to mention here, and this is on engagement on our Facebook group. We can go to the next slide. Please, no self-promotion. You can share free resources. You can share things with the group that are going to add value, but please do not share any links for appointments, any free special offer from Rainmakers, etc. You're welcome to always reach out to your mentors and facilitators, because that's what they're here for. You can share a link to your website, but it is mostly for feedback. Do not use this space to sell your products or services. Then sharing your social media links, they're good if you want to create a follow train, if you want to share feedback on your profiles or how you can improve them, you can do all of that. This is a group of learning, of growth and connection. So we want you guys to share. We just want to keep self-promotion to the minimal and create a welcoming environment for everyone. With that, I want to present to you our two speakers for today, our very own Caroline Cummings, CEO of Rain, and Raj Vable. I hope I pronounced it right. He is from Young Mountain Tea and a former team member. So let's begin. Caroline, take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Ani, and thank you, everybody. We know that we want you to sell your products. We just want to make sure that this group is kept as a safe space. So thank you, Ani, for adding the rules for engagement. And if you have any questions about that, like, hey, I have an offer that I would like to share with everybody. It's free. Can I do that? Just reach out to Ani and we'll sort through that with you, because ultimately we want you to help sell your products, just not in this educational environment. So I'm excited to talk with you guys today. Some of you know me, some of you don't, but I have been in your shoes. I've been the co-founder and CEO of two tech startups. One of them we dissolved and one of them I sold. And many of you will hear me say, I learned way more from the failed one than from the one that I exited from. So success is not always the best teacher. So being open to failure is really important. I raised $1 million for those startup companies. I'm now an angel investor through the Cascade Seed Fund, which prioritizes investing in women, people of color, and people in rural. And I also mentor at-risk youth. That's something I've been doing since I was an at-risk youth myself. I've closed deals from 5K to $1 million, and average deal size is about $200,000 in sales, which is pretty awesome. And then I've also raised about $7 million for nonprofits. Okay, so Nate, before you pull this poll up, I want to explain what these are, because I don't want to put you guys in a box, but what I want you to do is I want you to start thinking about the kind of business person you are, because no one is all five of these things. A friend of mine who had invested in my first startup, his name is Mike. I went to him and I said, hey, Mike, let's do a startup together. He's like, I don't have a stomach for startups. We were sitting at a bar, we were having a dinner together, and he's like, hand me that napkin. And he wrote these things on the napkin. He said, you're either an ideator, which is someone who's really an innovator. You come up with new, cool ideas all the time. And I do this. I thought everybody did this, but apparently that's not true. So you are an ideator. Next is a maker. These are like, you can physically make something. You can bake something. You can sew something. You can code something. You can engineer something. You can fashion something with your hands. You're a maker. That's not me. Starter. I'm a starter. You like a clean slate. You don't want to buy a franchise. You don't want to plug into someone else's business and be an employee, but you like to start things. You like to build things from the ground up. Grower. There's already been an existing organization around. Maybe they want to get from 1 million to 10 million, whatever that might be. This is my friend, Mike. He's a turnaround CEO. He comes in, when a company is at about 50 million, he helps them get to 200 million. And then he's also an exiter. He helps them sell. So it's really important to kind of know where you are. Ideator, you have all these, you constantly are coming up with new ideas. Maker, you physically make something. Starter, which is probably most of you here. Grower, which I can do, but I don't necessarily enjoy. And then exiter. So Nate, can you pull the poll up, I'd love to see what you guys are. You can pick more than one, but no one is all five. You might be able to do a little bit of everything, but we're talking about what are the areas that you think you mostly identify with. I don't see the poll yet, Nate.
It's up. It is up, Caroline. We're getting responses.
Oh,
Yeah,
you are.
It's possible that you don't see it because you are the one sharing the screen.
Oh,
But we
that's
have
weird.
it here. It's cool to
Okay.
see all the answers coming in.
Okay, good. Great. Let me know when it hits to about 60% of the people have taken the poll.
Okay, we're there.
Great. Okay. Close it and share it and tell me where we are because I can't see it.
Did it pop up for you, Caroline? No?
It did not, no.
Okay, so here are the results. So we have 67% saying that they are an ideator. That's the largest percentage. 56% say they are a maker. 60% say that they are a starter. 25% grower, and 2% exiter.
Great, thank you. That's pretty common. When we're talking to entrepreneurs and startups, the grower exiter they're always the lower numbers in that, and the first three are always the highest. So hopefully this helps you kind of realize, because at some point as you're growing your business, you're not going to be able to do all of these, and you're going to need to, fill these gaps on your team. Okay, who knows what this movie is? You guys, you could post it in the chat or
Field of Dreams.
Yeah, Field of Dreams. And what's the sort of mantra in this movie?
Build it, they will come.
Exactly. Thank you. I couldn't see who said that, but thank you.
Marty G.
Thank you. Awesome. And so this is a mantra that a lot of entrepreneurs take, is like, I'm just going to build my company and then people are going to show up. I'm going to create my product and people are going to show up. And that's actually not the case when we look at why startups fail. So I want someone to tell me, what do they think is wrong with this image? We've got the customer over here. We've got your team over here building towards the customer. What's wrong with this picture? You guys can unmute or post in chat.
One-sided.
The gap, it's one-sided. Yep.
You're building towards the customer rather than from the customer towards you.
Exactly. That's perfect. And yeah, Brian, the direction. So all of you, the startup people, should actually be on this island over here with the customer, building the product with the customer. And this is something we did really well in both of my startups. Was we did a ton of customer discovery. And any of you who are working with the venture catalysts on our team, this is what we help you do, so that you can make sure that, because by the time you get over here, you might be building all these pieces, but you get over here and they're like, wait, you gave me a circle and I want a square. And now you've spent all that time. So the minimum viable product approach, and reading Eric Ries's startup, Lean Startup, is a really good book. If you haven't, you should make it your Bible. You always want to include your customers in the R&D. So before you pull this poll up, the question that I really want to know, and I want you guys to be brutally honest here, is, you can pull the poll up, is how many of you actually talked to at least 3 customers before you launched your product? Should be a yes or no poll. It's weird that I can't see it. I usually can see it even in screen share mode.
I've got responses for that too, Caroline, when you're ready.
I can't.
Okay. What do
I
you?
can't see the poll.
Okay, you can post it in the chat. I see people are no, yes, 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 no. Yes, no. Okay, what are the responses, Nate?
The results that I see were that 69% said yes and 31% said no.
Okay, well, I appreciate you guys being honest. This is a step that is just super, super important as you're rolling out your product, and before you should even be thinking about spending a lot of money on digital marketing and sales. You really want to kind of fine tune this. Another thing you want to fine tune is, this is a little bit of branding here. What words do you want to own in the mind of the consumer? Whether or not you think you have words, you do. And some of the big companies are a little bit easier to identify. So we'll do some examples of those first. what word, single word, does BMW own in the mind of the consumers?
Luxury.
Luxury is one, but not the biggest. What else?
Performance.
Performance. Status, quality, reliability, driven. Brian's getting closer. Drive. So you could look in ads for BMW over the years, and oftentimes you just literally see a car and the word drive, close to what I have here. They want to be known as the car for performance, that you're going to get in and you're going to drive, right? And this is why a lot of people actually just go to Germany and drive on the Autobahn, because they want to experience what it's like to drive and have no speed limit, which I've done, and it's very scary. Okay, what word does Volvo own?
Safety.
Safety. You got it. Exactly. Now they've known this. This has been a word that they have promoted through their branding for years and years and years. Now, are they actually the safest car on the road? No, there's actually other brands out there that are more safe, but for some reason, people associate them with safety, and they reinforce that in all of their branding. Okay, what about Chanel? What word does Chanel own in the mind of the consumer?
Class.
Class, yeah, I like that one. Classy, luxury, yep.
Sophistication.
Dainty.
Sophistication, luxury. Yes, exactly. So now every time you interact with the Chanel brand, whether it's in a magazine or in a store or online, they're going to present themselves as coming from a place of luxury. I walked in their store in Hamburg when I was in Germany, and it is top-notch luxury experience. People walked in, one guy walked in with flip-flops. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy is out in public with his toenails looking like that. But they treated him with class, handed him a glass of champagne. I mean, it was an incredible experience. So you want to think about what kinds of feelings and emotions do you want people to associate with your brand and your products? What about home improvement? What brands come to mind for home improvement?
Lowe's.
Lowe's.
Home Depot.
Home Depot. Now for the people in Lane County, specifically in Eugene and Oregon, yeah, Annie.
Jerry's.
Jerry, you got it. So let's just tell you this really quickly. Everywhere in the world, so every year there's a TOMA report that comes out, top of mind awareness, that's usually done by newspapers, and they use it as a tool for advertising, for soliciting advertising. And everywhere in the country, when they ask for what company you think of when you hear home improvement, everybody says Lowe's or Home Depot, except for in Lane County, Jerry's. So it's pretty incredible. They have an awesome story. I don't have time to share it, but it just goes to show that you could be a local business and compete with the biggies and still own those words over some of the biggies. Pretty cool. So think about what one or two words you want to own in the mind of your consumers, and think about who you're selling it to, because now if you own the word luxury and you're targeting women over the age of 40 who have an education of at least a bachelor's with an income of at least 70,000 or higher, where are those women hanging out? Because you need to find out where you're going to do your online digital marketing, right? Are they on Instagram? Are they on TikTok? Where are they? You want to find them. Probably not on TikTok. Okay, so actually that's not true. I'll back that up. There are some pretty cool TikTok pages focusing on the luxury market. And then most of us have two markets. There's a primary market and a secondary market, and you may own different words with those different markets, and that means your strategies online need to vary. So for example, in my second startup, we were digital marketing for in the real estate market. Our primary market was brokers and realtors. However, we were selling leads to them, and we had an open marketplace. So our secondary market in that open marketplace was service providers, like people who do home inspections or people who are roofers, right? Who want to get in front of those realtors. And again, clearly the message I'm going to send to a realtor and a broker is going to be different than I'm going to send to a roofer, right? So you kind of want to understand who your primary and who your secondary markets are. Depending on your industry, you then want to balance out your marketing budget. Maybe 80% of your marketing budget online goes to your primary, 20% goes to your secondary. You also want to think about what are your top 5 to 7 market filters. So you have this higher level market filter of, demographics, gender, age, income, geography. Then you start to break down into more details, sort of the psychographic, or what are their beliefs, their habits, do they have children, and sort of think through what they are. So one of your homework assignments will be to do this, to come up with what you think your 5 or 7 market filters are. And we're going to kind of walk through one together right now. So let's say we all together open up a local organic grocer. That's what everybody on this call, we're all on the same startup team. That's what we're doing. Here are some of the market filters that would go with that, right? So this is based on research. We're going to target women. They're going to spend 80% of the money is going to be spent by the women who are between 20 and 55 years old. They're college educated. They earn over $50,000 a year. They're eco-conscious. They prefer to shop local, and they listen to NPR. So clearly, if I want to run an ad on the radio, I'm probably going to do it on the local NPR station, right? I'm also going to make sure that I'm featuring all the local vendors that are in our store, because I know that's what they care about. Make sense, you guys? Okay. So these are some exercises for you guys to work through. And then how do you know this to be true? Because this is going to change, especially based on economic climate, crises, pandemics, fires, storms, right? Wherever you are, there could be different things happening in the market. So you constantly have to re-examine, are those market filters the same? Because for a lot of businesses, their market filters changed during the pandemic, right? Or a few of them changed. So the other part of my presentation is focused on TAM, SAM, SOM. Has put in the chat if you've heard of this before. Just say yes or no. Yes, you've heard of it. No, you haven't. Combination of no's and yeses. Okay, so TAM means your total available market. This is something you need to know. Every business needs to know. Who's your total available market? All the possible people in the world who could potentially buy your product. No one ever reaches their TAM, not even Nike or Intel. Can you guys put yourselves on mute? I can hear someone ruffling around. I just want to make sure everybody's muted. Thank you. So that's your TAM. Your SAM is your segmented available market. This is who you can really reach based on your business model, probably within like a 10, 20-year period. And then SOM is your share of the market, or also your segmented obtainable market. This is who you can reach based on the practical limitations of your business model within the first few years. So we're going to walk through an exercise on this. Let's say all of us on this call have a company, and our customer, it's a little silly, but play along because I think it's a fun exercise. Our customer is all the swordfish in the ocean, right? So that's our TAM. All the swordfish, no matter where they're swimming, if it's in the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, it's all the swordfish in the world. Now our SAM is actually all the swordfish within casting range of our dock, because this is where our company is, okay? So right now, we can only reach the swordfish within casting range of the dock. And then if we break it down even further, our share of the market, this is going to be all the swordfish that we can actually catch with the resources we have. So if there's only 10 of us in the team and only have 10 fishing rods, maybe we have 1 or 2 fishing boats. So we're never going to be able to reach all the swordfish or even beyond this body of water, because we have limitations in our business model and we can only reach who we can reach. Does that make sense, you guys? Right? So if you have a local business, you can't say that your TAM is everyone in Oregon, even though, because not everyone in Oregon is going to travel to your town or use the internet, or maybe you can't ship or whatever. Maybe your business model doesn't have the right margins, which you're going to learn from Raj more about pricing and margins. But this is a really sort of rudimentary example of how to think about your TAM, SAM, and SOM. And if somebody on my team, if you haven't already, can put the link to the article that I've written about this, that gives a little bit more detail. There's also a spreadsheet that we're going to walk through here in the last few minutes. But you need to think about who you intend your initial market to be, knowing that that might change over time. And to be a really good entrepreneur, you have to be prepared to pivot and meet the demands of your market. I've been interviewed a lot about what the definition of an entrepreneur is, and it really is two things. One, you start something from nothing. And two, you learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable most of the time, right? Because if it was easy, everybody would do what we do, and it's not. Okay, so we're gonna switch over real quick in the last few minutes here, and I want to share this spreadsheet. Can you guys see this spreadsheet right now? Tam, Sam, Som? Okay, excellent. So you guys will all get access to this spreadsheet. This is a really great way to ultimately do 3-year annual projections. You could do it for 5 years, but there's no sense in doing it for 5 years. I remember presenting to investors and gave them 5 years, and they opened up my plan. And this was back in the day when we printed plans and handed them out. And the investor, she just crossed off years 3 to 5. She was like, I don't care about those years. Let's see if you can do year 1 and year 2. But I think 3 years is a really good way. So before you say, okay, I have a hair salon, it's in Florence, Oregon, I'm going to do 50,000 in my first year, 100,000 in the second year, and 200,000 in the third year. Well, let's figure out if that's even possible, because based on the population in the Tam, Sam, and Som, it doesn't seem like that's possible. So let me show you. You guys will be able to get this spreadsheet, as I mentioned, and play around with it on your own. But every number in here, in this column C and E, changes based on the population. So for example, if Florence, Oregon actually had 100,000 people, which it doesn't, and I know they don't want that, all of these numbers change, and you can see the projections change because there's a larger market for you to reach with your hair salon. But it's not. So there's 9,900 people. That's the TAM, the total available market. We know you're never going to reach that. So then over here, you have to plug in percentages based on what's asked in column D. So we want to know how many of them are over the age of 18. Jennifer on my team will put in some links so that you can actually look up populations and regions. And then there's other resources that can tell you more about specifics as far as gender and age and income. But for the sake of today's exercise, we know that 60% are over the age of 18. So that number changed. We're now down to 5,940 people. And now we want to know who earns over 30,000 a year. So we know that based on research. So now our total available market is actually only 2,079 people who can come into our salon. Now we're going to break it down to the segmented attainable market. This is the critical business model we're targeting. Okay. So that is 40%. 40% of them really are who we could reach within the next 10 years. Okay. And then we want to know, how does that relate back to the total population and the TAM? We are now within the next 10 years or so going to reach 8%, or we hope to reach 8% of the total population of Florence. And it's 40% of our TAM. Okay. Then we move into our share of the market. So this salon in Florence, their share of the market realistically can only reach about 30% of this 832 in the next few years. So now we're down to 249 people that we're going to serve. Okay. So that comes down to 3% of the total Florence population and about 12% of our TAM. You guys following me so far? Great. Okay. So now let's see how that translates down into actual financials for yourself. So this is broken down by number of customers we want to serve in year 1, year 2, and year 3. So out of this 249, we believe we could reach about 25% of them. So that's this 62 number right here. Okay, you see we got the formulas in there. When you get the spreadsheet, the formulas will be in there for you as well. Then in year 2, we think we can reach about half of the 249. And then by year 3, we think we can reach about 187. Now, before you look at annual sales, this is being driven by the numbers behind the numbers here. So what's an average customer? What's an average sale in this salon? So we have to go through your QuickBooks. We have to look at some numbers. We have to look at receipts. We figured out that her average sale is about $65 every time someone comes in. Sure, some spend 100, some spend 30. But the average customer spends $65 each time they come into her salon. And that average person comes in about 4 times a year. Now, if you're me, I'm going in the salon every 6 weeks because I got to cover up my gray hair. So I'm a little bit different of a customer. Now, she clearly has those customers as well. And what we did was we separated out into 2 markets, her primary market, which is the folks who are coming in 4 times a year. And then there's the market like me, who's going to come in 8-ish times a year, because we have different numbers to focus on there. But again, for sake of this exercise, trying to simplify it to kind of show you how you can come up with revenue projections based on market sizing. So now that person's coming in 4 times a year. So the average revenue per customer per year is the $65 times the 4 visits a year. So the average person's going to pay $260. And that's how these numbers are changed over here. So if we can get our average customer sale up, let's say we really want to try and get people to buy shampoo or also get their nails done or whatever it is. Let's say we can get this up to $100. You can see how that changes the revenue projections over here. So I'm going to pause for a minute and see if you guys, I threw a lot of numbers at you. I want to see if you have any questions. Jackie's asking, are there tactics to determine what percentage you believe you can reach? Yeah, there definitely is. And it depends on the market you're in. I'm going to give a little plug for LivePlan, online business planning software. They have industry benchmarking built in. So as you're filling it out, if you say you're a salon or you're a winemaker or you're a graphic designer or you're a service-based business, they have different benchmarks built within LivePlan that will help you determine what these percentages should be. And then depending on the region, there's a ton of research out there, and libraries are an excellent research resource for research. Librarians love it. You go in and you say, look, I'm starting this business. Here's who I think my customer is. Can you help me sort of think through my TAM, SAM, and SOM? They would love to do that for you. They have master's degrees. Many of them have PhDs, and they would love to geek out on it with you. All right, some other questions popping in. And we have about a minute because then we need to transition over to Raj. And so if I don't get to all of these questions, I will definitely follow up, but we'll ask one more. So if you have no competition in your city or state, lucky you, first of all, because pretty much everybody has competition. Maybe you don't have a direct competitor. Like in this sense, maybe there's not another salon, but people are getting their hair done somehow, even if it's store-bought hair dye or their great aunt who's trimming their hair for them or whoever it might be. You still have to find a way to get them to come to you to solve the problem the way they're currently solving the problem that you want to solve for them. Thank you for putting in the links. Okay, you guys, I would love to answer a ton more questions. And I did tell Ani that I wasn't able to do a mentor hours, but I had some time open up. It won't be next week. It'll probably be the week after that. So Ani, let's sort out a date so that I can dig in a little bit deeper with you guys on these numbers, but have fun with the spreadsheet. I'm telling you, it's a great time. Don't put in the total population of the world for your TAM. Do not do that. I've seen people do that. And then you can kind of play around with it and revisit it every few months to see how that goes. Great. Well, thank you guys. I hope that was super helpful. It's always fun content for me to deliver, and I look forward to working with you guys more closely on this. The spreadsheet will be posted in the Facebook page group, right? Darren, do you want to quickly tell everybody where the resources will be?
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys click on if you go to the Facebook group, everything's already loaded up into the guides section. So if you look at the top of that section, just under the header image in our Facebook group, you'll see guides. Click there, and I've been actively posting every link, recommendation, suggestion. It's all there for you.
Awesome. Thank you. And I have to go because I'm interviewing some folks. So I look forward to staying connected to you guys, and I'm going to hand it over to Raj. Thanks, everybody.
Excuse me, Raj, let me introduce you first.
Okay.
Thank you, Caroline, for that awesome presentation. I did write down all of your questions, so I will give them to Caroline to answer. And I would like to introduce you to Raj, who's going to talk about pricing for profit. Raj started Young Mountain Tea with a promise. If Himalayan communities would grow tea, he would set up a company in the US to sell it. He didn't know anything about business when he started and didn't have any money to start with. So he's been bootstrapping his venture from the beginning. And he also served as a venture catalyst for Oregon Rain for 2 years around the Oak Ridge area, Lowell and Veneta. And he was born in a small town in Michigan. And he is a strong believer in the spirit of rural entrepreneurship, whether that is in Oregon, in India, or beyond. So I'll let you take it away, Raj. We're very glad to have you here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ani. And hello, everybody. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces. Nice to be introduced to a lot more people. I hope we'll have the chance to chat either in this session or on Friday's office hours. I'm excited to receive the torch from Caroline and continue it forward. I love that she ended with have fun with spreadsheets because that's what we're going to continue to do. So I'm going to share my screen and then jump on in. Let's see here. I'll put it in present mode. All right. Can I get a thumbs up if this is working properly? Great. Cool. Yeah. What we're going to do is basically continue the conversation that Caroline started. Thinking about numbers as it relates to sales figures and projections. We're going to look at two parts. We're going to look at pricing and profit, and we'll actually do it in the reverse order. First, we're going to look at profit and pull it apart and look at the two things that control that calculation. And then we'll also go into pricing to understand just tactics that you can think about in employing for your own business. As Ani mentioned, I have learned this all the hard way myself through the business Young Mountain Tea. We're now turning 8 years old, so I think we're at the point where we can, I was going to say, I think we're sort of through the woods of figuring out the foundation of the company, but I don't know if that ever really is the case. But to say that a lot of this stuff is material that I had learned through a similar type of accelerator, applied to my business, learned it again, applied it again. And so this iterative process of learning and then applying and then learning is one that never really ends, but hopefully this is familiar content to some and then new for others, but it'll be, I think, through applying to your own businesses that it'll start to be more meaningful in the long run. Okay, so yeah, I think there's a bunch of slides that say the title, but yeah, we're gonna start on the profit side of this and then work towards the pricing. I'm going to only sort of keep an eye on the chat. So if things come up, Ani or somebody else on the RAIN team, please hop in to help guide the process.
You've got it.
Okay, well, actually, I said that, and then let's start with a question in the chat. So I'm curious, when you think about the term profit margin, what comes to mind? Can you just drop that in the chat? Find the chat while we do this.
How much money you can take home, money you get to keep or reinvest in the business.
Yeah.
How do I know what margin I should be operating at?
Great.
Difference between cost and income, whatever is left over after expenses, what you make over cost, difference between cost of goods sold and retail price, money left after all the things.
Totally. I think these are all correct characterizations of profit and also reflective of the fact that it can mean a lot of things from different people. And even within the same business, you can look at the different profitability from a couple different perspectives. So let's just start by giving the high level overview of what it is. As several people have described, is essentially the difference between the revenue, how much you make, and the cost. Whatever's left over is what we get to take home and use to apply to our own bank accounts or reinvesting and growing the business. And in thinking about margin, it's oftenly profit margins typically discussed in two different ways. One is as a percentage, which is more useful often for comparing between, say, different products or different sales channels. And then there's also just in a hard dollar amount. So this is helpful for doing things more around cash flow management to understand how much do you have enough to pay yourself in payroll for next month, which is the most common question we're asking ourselves. So it's the kind of balance of these two ways of thinking about profit margin that'll be helpful in different contexts. We're going to focus primarily on this one, on the percentage, but certainly, you just take out the bottom of the fraction and then you have the dollar amount too. So these are the ways that the profit margin can be expressed. And then typically when we think about the profit margin, there's two places, there are two types that we look at. One is the gross profit margin, which is how much money is made, how much revenue is brought into the business, subtracting off the variable costs. And variable costs are those ones that increase as you sell more. So it's often referred to as the cost of goods sold or the cost of sales for service-based businesses. And basically this is something that, let's say you're selling veggie burgers. I was going to say hamburgers, but I want to be a little bit more modern. And you have, you know that as you sell more, you're going to need more buns. You're going to need more patties. You're going to need more butter to make the buns taste great. And so those kinds of costs that are going to scale with the business are the ones that we think of as variable costs. And so when you subtract that off your revenue, that's when you get the gross margin. And then if you look further down and subtract off basically every other type of expense, things that aren't impacted by selling more, that's how we end up with the net profit margin. And so when people refer to the bottom line, typically what they're talking about is the net profit margin, which is all the revenue minus every type of expense that we see. This kind of becomes a little bit more clear when we look at a profit and loss statement. So you can see up here, we've got the income, right? Here's the top part, the total income gives you the revenue. You subtract off the cost of goods sold, and then you get the gross profit here. And then you subtract off everything else from the advertising to parts of payroll to insurance, those things that don't vary with the amount that you sell, but are fixed costs. And that's how you come up down here. Net operating income is often one way of expressing net profit margin. And if that doesn't make total sense, I'm happy to talk more about it either at the end or in the office hours again on Friday. But yeah, this is how we look at the places that profit margin shows up. Again, gross right here and then net down below. And sometimes people just drop the word profit, say margin. And so I might use that synonymously, but they mean the same thing. And so, yeah, that's kind of what it is conceptually, or sort of in the different statements that you might find it. But this is the actual calculation. You have the amount of money you make, you subtract off the cost, and then you divide it by something. I'm curious if you've dropped in the chat, what do you think goes in the bottom of that fraction? Revenue minus cost divided by what will give you a sense of what your profit margin is as a percent. Sarah's saying revenue, price, sales, gross. Okay, cool. I can see a lot of wheels turning. And it's great that we've all got slightly different perspectives. Punchline here is that what goes in the bottom is revenue. So if you're selling an individual product, you can replace the word revenue with price. So if you got, well, actually we'll talk about an example in a second, but this is the basic fraction. If you're trying to figure out what your gross profit margin is as a percent, which is often the most helpful thing in sales conversations, because you want to know how much margin do I have on this product. This is how you figure it out. You take how much you're selling it for, you subtract off how much it costs to make it, and you divide it by the selling price, which would be the revenue for a higher level picture. And then because a lot of times this is going to be happening in spreadsheets, going back to what, elementary school, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, PEMDAS, remember to include the parentheses in the top part of the fraction, because if you just do revenue minus cost divided by revenue, you won't get the right number. And so here we go, let's move in. And actually, I think Annie is in here. Yeah, I hope it's all right, but I've continued to use Bella's soap box as an example here. And so this is a fictitious example, but let's say that we're selling soap. And let's say that a bar of soap costs $10. And we know that all the ingredients and packaging labor that goes into it costs a total of $4. So using that same formula that we just worked on, what would you all think is the profit margin expressed as a percent? And Lily, yes, we will talk about service-based business at the end as well. Nice. 60% seems to be the consensus, which is indeed correct. Yes, that's right. And here's how we do it. We do 10 minus 4, so the selling price minus the cost, divided by the cost, or sorry, the price. So that becomes 6 divided by 10, which is 60%. And 60% gross margins for physical products is a pretty good one, typically. I'm in the food and beverage business where the goal is to get anything above 40% across all channels. So in this case, this would be a pretty strong percentage to be using for direct-to-consumer sales. And then, so that's it. We'll go into a little bit more of an involved example in a second, but that's basically how one goes about calculating the profit margin. And in our line of work, terms that are often confused or used in one context that might not be totally relevant to others is margin versus markup. And those are actually two different things. They use the same inputs. They're all based on the selling price, the revenue, and the cost, but the way they're expressed is different. So this is just for clarity, especially when you sell to retailers, they say, well, what's the markup versus the margin? Here's how it's differentiated. And the only thing is what you're dividing by down at the bottom. So in both cases, you subtract off the revenue minus the cost. And then in the margin scenario, you divide it by the revenue. Whereas in the markup scenario, you divide it by the cost. So here's what that looks like. For that same example, a $10 bar of soap that costs $6 to make. The margin, sorry, $4 to make. The margin here is 6 divided by 10 is 60%. The markup versus the cost, that's when we substitute the cost in down at the bottom, becomes 150%, 6 divided by 4. So you can see that there's a pretty significant difference between margin and markup. And so if a store says that they mark up by 100%, that's the same thing as essentially doubling your price. So that means your margin would be 50%. So we can dig into the numbers more, but that's differentiating, and it's important to make sure that you know which one you're talking about in which conversations, because sometimes if you're talking about numbers and people are referring to a different one, it's good to clarify. We're talking margin, which means the revenue or the price goes in the denominator, or we're talking about markup, which means the cost goes in the bottom of the fraction. Okay, so again, this is usually in thinking about day-to-day sales for internal conversations, what we're looking at in calculating the profit margin. And again, don't forget those parentheses because you'll get the wrong numbers if you don't use them. Okay, so now we'll kind of bring it together with looking at an example of which has a larger impact on your profit margin. Increasing price by $1 or decreasing costs by $1. And before we jump in, I'd be really curious if you can drop in the chat, which do you think has more of an impact? Increasing price or decreasing cost? A couple of votes for decreasing costs. More votes for decreasing cost. All right, is anybody gonna go on the increasing price? No, okay, well, we have a favorite. Let's see if this holds true. And I found this COVID era picture of a dollar sign that I thought was a good segue. So, okay, we're back into spreadsheets, and this is also a spreadsheet that will be made available to everybody after. Let me zoom in to make it a little larger. All right, can I get a thumbs up? Is this legible? Great. Okay, so let's use an example. Let's say that we are selling a live edge table down here below. Beautiful table. I wish I could afford or buy one of those. And because for this example, let's say it costs $100, which is a really good deal for a live edge table. And so let's look at how much it costs to make it and assume that's a $75 in the original. So we're selling it for $100 and it costs us $75 to make it. So the profit margin, as it's expressed by as just a hard dollar, you just subtract the cost from the price to get 25 bucks. And then it's pretty straightforward, right? We can, this is the same equation that we do. We divide the profit margin as $1 by the original price. So just to make the numbers a little bit more dramatic, I used $10 instead of $1 here. And so let's look at, if we increase the price by $10, then the price goes from $100 to $110. And in this scenario, we keep the cost the same. So then to calculate this, remember, we always start with the equal sign whenever we're doing spreadsheets. We do this minus this, right? The price minus the cost, to see that the profit margin is $35. And then to determine the profit margin as a percent, we divide this, the dollars amount, by the price to see, okay, when we increase the price by $10, the margin jumps up to 32%. So now let's look at the other scenario where rather than increase the cost, increase the price, we're decreasing the cost. So in this scenario, we're going to keep the price at the same amount, $100. We're going to decrease the cost from the original to $65. So you can see that actually, not too surprisingly, the margin as a hard dollar amount is still $35. So in the end of the day, you're bringing home $35 in either scenario. But as a percent of the overall, the margin expressed as a percent becomes 35%. So we can see that we're actually bringing home more as a percent when we decrease the cost than when we increase the price. And this is just kind of one of the crazy things about math and how it works. So let's come back to these slides. And yes, so everybody who had guessed it was correct in that the punchline here is decreasing your costs is a better way to increase your margin than increasing price. Okay, so that's the portion on profits. After this, we'll switch gears to talk about sales. But any questions so far on this? And I'll pull up the chat to see. And Ani,
I've been writing the questions.
Yeah.
So you tell me when we need to stop to continue, because we can answer the rest during mentor hours.
Sounds good.
How do I know what margin I should be operating at?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the slides we have in here that you'll have access to is a bank of resources to figure that out. It's often industry specific. So you'll want to research your industry. And if you search like gross profit margins for whatever your industry is, you can at least see common percentages for others. Usually if you're selling a physical product, your profit margins are going to be lower than if you're a service-based business because the type of expenses are different. That's not always the case, but it would be good to look at just doing some Googling to understand what is standard for your industry.
Awesome, thank you. You guys should also know that the SBDC helps with this kind of market research and they offer free help. In the homework, I did include a link to the SBDC if you guys wanted to reach out to them to help you figure out your industry. Another question is, should there be a limit or percentage of what you should reinvest into your company?
That's a really interesting question. I think that's really depending on sort of your goals for your business, what kind of growth you want to have, as well as what stage of business you're at. Usually earlier stage businesses like ours, any profit that gets generated gets plowed back into the business to keep growing it. Whereas later stage businesses, especially if there's investors involved or other partners, will want to have some kind of dividend. So pulling money out and distributing it might be a call there. I can share that generally what we've aimed for is kind of in the short run, any profit that we generate is going to go back into the business to keep growing it. In the long run, what we're hoping to be able to do is to one day collect on those dividends by taking between 10 and 15%. That's a number that we developed very specific to our case because of what our long-term goals are. But that would definitely be something that you'd want to work with a financial advisor to figure out how the big puzzle all connects. Awesome. And I think the SBDC has great resources there as well.
Yes, and also as part of being a graduate from our accelerator programs, you do get some one-on-one help. This will come after we finish this program, but know that that is a possibility there. I'm going to do one more question so we can continue the presentation and then see about it. Margin percentage is increased, but it's not profit. So why gear towards percentage versus dollars? And another comment that is related to that is, when it comes down to feeding my family in real life, bringing home $10 more is $10 more, no matter what. So where does increasing that profit margin percentage become more important than the real dollars?
Yeah, this is a great question, which is, why does the percent matter if it's the hard dollars that are actually what you're going to see? And the point of that is, if you're looking at just paying bills, that, yeah, the dollar value likely is the more relevant metric to look at. However, if you'd want to do any kind of comparison or look at things at scale, then the percentage is a much more useful thing because it gives you a little bit of a level playing field. So for example, let's say you're looking at selling direct to consumer, say through a website, versus selling to a consumer through a retail. If you look at the per unit costs, per unit margins, they're going to be pretty different when you look at the dollar amounts. But if you look at the percentage, you get more insight into the way that there's differences there. I didn't do a very good job of explaining that. I guess the most important part is that the percentage is useful for making comparisons for decision making, more so than if you're just looking at the dollar amount, because the dollar amount, the other thing is that that dollar amount is going to change as you grow. Like if you sell 10 units versus 10,000, that dollar amount is going to be pretty wildly different, right? If you're looking at the profit margin as a dollar amount. If you're looking as a percent, it would be theoretically, in the simplest case, the same. And so that gives you a better benchline or benchmark to use in looking at different options that you might be considering. So we most often apply this when looking at our sales channels. So right now, for example, we want to sell to universities, and we want to understand what will our margin percents look like if we sell to a university in comparison to selling direct to consumer through our website. And the dollar value isn't a very helpful comparison because it really depends on the volume of products that we're selling. So I hope that helps, and I'm happy to go into more detail, but it's a good question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll wait for the comments, and if there's any more clarification to do, we'll do them after the rest of the presentation. Sounds good?
That sounds good. Yep. Okay. Well, now let's switch gears. We've talked about the profit margin, and now let's just cover some good tactics for developing what pricing to sell. And if you're like me, it's really bizarre to feel like you're charging somebody, say, $10 for a bag of tea when it costs $2 to make. It feels kind of like uncomfortable a little bit to be asking that much when you have a sense of what you're, how much you're making. But I'll say that there's really good reason. And I guess the take home is generally, before we jump in, to probably price higher than you think feels normal. That's pretty much a consistent thing that I've seen across most businesses when they start versus where they end up, is that they usually regret starting too low, because it's often harder to increase price down the road than it is to lower it if you start a little higher. But in doing this, what we want to do is think about not only yourself, but your customer, and how that you're going to set a price that is good for both. So yeah, this is actually the summary slide of the one at the end. What we want to do is create wins for you and your customer. We want to work out what kind of pricing you absolutely need to keep the doors open, which would be dependent on what our fixed costs and our variable costs, or our COGS, are. And then you want to give yourself enough room to work in discounts and wholesale services or other people in the supply chain that gets to the end customer that you might not think about initially, but often enter the picture down the road. So the biggest thing, kind of echo Caroline's sentiment about developing the product with your customer, is to also develop the pricing with the customer. So ask them in those customer discovery questions, how much do you spend on whatever your service or product is now? And how do you feel about that? And it's often surprising, but just those conversations, that was for us like, oh, wow, we are undercharging everybody. And usually the perception is a low price is a low quality product. So we had raised our prices just based on input that, yeah, you're kind of middle to low end of the market. And for the quality that you guys have, it doesn't line up with the pricing. So that was surprising input. And I encourage you all to just ask people, whether that's at the farmer's market or through a survey, just what they expect to pay for the same product or service elsewhere. And then to also go in and find out what other people are selling at. So yeah, whether that's if you're, going into a retail store and taking a picture of the shelving and then going home and dissecting all the prices, or doing research online to see who the competition is and what they're selling it at, and just looking at that so you understand where in the market your pricing falls. And you might choose to be on the low side if you're competing, say, on price, or you might choose to be on the high side. But just being very cognizant that you're never alone in selling, and you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in the right spot in the market based on what the competition is a really valuable thing to hold in your mind when you're developing the pricing. And then, yes, it's a good thing to always have different options for your customers. So not everything just priced at one point, but across several. And I have a picture of a menu for a wine bar here for a reason. Does anybody know the most commonly purchased glass of wine on a wine menu, where it falls? Drop in the chat if you've got guesses. Great. Middle, second from the least expensive, middle. Yeah, second from the top. Yeah, it is. Great guesses, folks. It's the second from the bottom. So basically, most people don't want to pay a ton for wine, but they don't want to be at the absolute bottom either. So including higher priced products, even if you don't think that they will necessarily move, to create the perception of options for your customers is a really valuable approach as well. And then finally, as I said at the beginning, give yourself room to grow, because often there will be, if you want to do things like offer discounts where you're not losing money, or if you want to start selling through other partners, they will need to have their cuts as well. And so giving yourself that space so that when other people get involved, you can still make the profits that you need to make the business viable is really valuable. Danielle, how would you word that to ask your customers about your pricing without sounding incompetent or not confident? I think, it's useful to just be transparent. Like, we're doing some research, or we're doing a quick study. We're asking people to get a sense of what they want, and so we can improve our services. Often framing it as you're helping us to improve what we do is helpful. Rachel Colin, who's one of the mentors, is really good at helping with this. So I would definitely turn to her for questions on this. But yeah, just framing it, we're trying to get better at giving you the service that you want and have a few questions for you, and kind of framing it in that context is how we've gone about doing it. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of a reiteration of what we covered as a whole, and then we have time for questions. But in summary, when we're talking about profit margin, this is the formula that we use. And if you're doing it as a percent, what you would do for comparative purposes primarily, to make sure to drop price in the denominator and to include parentheses when you're developing the formula. And then this is that wonky example that increasing profit margin, you get more bang for your buck by lowering costs and increasing price. So keep your costs low. And then when setting price, give yourself plenty of room to grow. Look at the competition and ask your customers. So I wanted to leave you with this spreadsheet, which is the same one that we already looked at. And again, you'll have access to it. But there's a couple tabs down at the bottom. The first one is the one that we just looked at together about increasing versus decreasing costs. But this second one is lifted from and adapted from what we use internally for developing our margins, which is, this is going to be specific to a physical product and for our situation, but the format would hopefully be helpful for anybody, which is to list out all the types of costs that you have, including the credit card fees, because those add up, throwing in, and you can play around with different sales prices in this column. And then this will automatically calculate what your gross margin percents would look like for your products. And I would just encourage you to try and do this if you look at the same product, but sold through 3 different sales channels. In this case, is e-commerce, grocery, and distributors, just what impact there is on the margin over here. And you can see that just because of what we need to do to be competitive among, say, distributors, the margin varies pretty wildly. So yeah, again, this will be something you have access to. I hope you'll use it. I hope it's helpful. There's one other tab down here on discounts where there's a little bit of an explanation. Yeah, this is another tab that you can see what happens if you discount, because that also has pretty interesting impacts on profit margin. And I'll look forward to, if anybody gets that far in the spreadsheet, to talking about it more on Friday. So with that, I will stop my screen share and turn to questions. So thanks for the chance to share.
Thank you, Raj. That was awesome. I hope you guys got a good kick out of these numbers and have room to play. Everything is already posted on the Facebook group. And I usually wait until Friday when we have the recording to send out the email. But I can send out the email today and send you the recording later, so that if you guys want to work on your numbers before the mentor hours, you can get on it. And that way you can ask more questions to Raj. Raj, I have a list of questions over here that people have been asking throughout the presentation. So if that's okay with you, I'm going to start.
Yeah,
all right. Can you give an example of a service-based business? Maybe we can leave that for the mentor hour, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I'll be honest that I'm not as well versed at service-based businesses because we aren't one. So when I looked this up in anticipation of this question, what I found is that, the types of expenses, again, when we look at gross margin percent, there's going to be just the cost of goods sold that is going to be the variable cost. But typically that's going to be the time of the person providing the service is the driving cost, as well as if it is, say, a physical space that's used, say for like a massage parlor or a hairdresser, the amount of space that gets used to deliver that product. So it'd be like a fraction of the rent that you would use against the total cost. If any mentor is on the call and wants to sprinkle in any thoughts, if they have experience developing margins for service-based businesses, please, or anybody else in the group.
Yeah, I mean, usually the main difference will be that if you are offering a service, most likely most of your expenses are going to be fixed. And then your general cost that you have to take into account is your time. And so you need to figure out how much do you want to earn per time, or how much are other people giving a similar service are charging for that. But I think that it's very, very, very important, regardless of if you're giving a service or giving a product, what is your most minimum that you can do? Like what's the minimum that you can be paid in order to continue to do this? And don't stay on the minimum, just make sure that you are not paying to provide your service for too long, because obviously we are going to not have profits for a bit when we are starting. But it has to be a healthy relationship in between what you're putting out there and what you're getting back. So
and to underline something Ani just said, one of the most commonly overlooked expenses for any entrepreneur is the cost of your own time. And the reason that's really important to think about and to factor in is because eventually, hopefully, you'll be in a position to hire somebody to take over whatever component of your business you have to do by yourself right now. And when you do that, if you don't have a sense of the actual costs that are going in, your business is going to take a pretty big hit. So even if it's not something that you're using in the day-to-day to drive decision-making, it feels a little fabricated to say, how much is my time worth? It's still a really helpful exercise. So both you have a sense of how much time is going in, as well as when you do bring in somebody else to take over, say, the production of whatever you're making, you've got a stronger sense of what pricing you'll need to support that. I'd also offer that should you want to go one step even further in that direction, to begin tracking your time and differentiating by what parts of your business. This is something that I got dragged into kicking and screaming because our finance lead said we should do it and I didn't want to. But it has been a really valuable exercise to realize how much is going into different parts. And that helps to inform the way you think about bringing on people eventually as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So if somebody resells unique items that vary in cost, such as auctions, I think, Linda, if you can clarify here, are you asking about how to price when your cost is different depending on the item? Well, we'll wait for her to answer, but in the meantime, this kind of, it's linked to what we were just talking about time. Somebody asked if they should include the time on the cost.
Yes.
Perfect. Straightforward. As an owner, are you paying yourself a salary or waiting for future dividends, or both?
I'm trying to figure out the best way to politically correctly answer that. I'm an owner of an LLC. So we do owner draws, which are effectively like salaries. And then any profit that comes up right now, we're putting back into the business. And that's the plan for the next couple of years until we get the business to a slightly larger position so that the dividends are more substantial.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have to be very clear. And this is kind of a reality check if you're starting. Entrepreneurship has a price that you pay. And at the beginning, that price is your time, is your resources. There are standards of the amount of time that it could take you to be profitable, and that depends on your industry. But just walk in it knowing that that is something that happens. It's part of the reality of it, and you need to be able to plan for it. This is why a lot of us at some point have had 2 jobs or 3 jobs or 4 jobs in order to be able to see our baby grow into its full potential.
Absolutely. Well said.
How do you account for the impact of price on the number of sales?
Sorry, can you repeat that one?
How do you account for the impact of price on the number of sales? I think this is related to if you increase your price, is it going to affect your sales?
If you increase your prices, oh, I see. It kind of depends on your market and your relationships with your customers and the way you communicate it. That's what we found is the most important thing, is if we are increasing prices, to share why that's happening. So for example, right now, with the global supply crisis being what it is, prices for importing anything or purchasing goods, I'm sure anybody who's involved with physical products knows, is really challenging. And so we had to do a flat 10% increase of all of our wholesale products. But we built up to letting people know it was coming. We gave them a window to purchase at the existing price before the price set in. And then once it set in, we were very communicative and very hands-on with our customers so they understood how this is going to play out in the long run. And so much of sales is relationship-based in any industry, but especially food and beverage. That it really, I think, is a testament to the quality of the relationships that you have with your customers, whether they're wholesale or whether they're consumers.
That's awesome. Very good. Somebody here asked, if offering a unique service that's not yet available, how do they figure out how to price it? For example, connecting a person with a skill to another person needing a skill.
Yeah, so I would say that sounds like a customer discovery type of question. So you have to figure out, talking to the people who will be the potential buyers of the service, what they'd be willing to pay. And as Caroline mentioned, there's always some competition or some variation that's already happening. So in her example about the hair salon in Florence, if there is no salon, people are still getting their hair cut some way. So whatever problem you're solving for your customer, there's some way that problem is being addressed, maybe not solved, but that they're wrestling with it now. and figuring out with them how to quantify that is how I'd go about doing it. And usually you don't need a ton of people, 5 to 10 people. And oftentimes people are excited to help small businesses figure things out. So if you just say like, I would like to hop on a Zoom call with you and I'll walk you through what we're thinking about and I'd love your input. Not only does that give you valuable information for setting your pricing, but often those people become your ambassadors and your advocates because then they feel bought into the process. So I think that our business was definitely built the wrong way of a product looking for a market, as Caroline mentioned. But the more that we can sort of put our headspace into the perspective of the consumer and walk back to the business itself, the stronger the business will be.
Awesome. So how do you determine predicting the profit margins or using them when they are unpredictable? This is the clarification on that question about how do you price unique items when they vary in cost. And then they will also vary on the sale because it is through auctions.
Yeah.
And so she looks at the type of products that she sells and that they generally have a higher margin on. And that's usually the only way that she uses that.
Yeah. I think it's important high level to share something that Rick Hood, one of the mentors, had shared with me in one of our first conversations, which that all projections are kind of wishful aspirations. We don't really know a lot of times when we put together projections, what's going to play out. So whether that's a gross profit margin or whether that's any part of those numbers, you have to accept that these are the things that you're going to have to continually revisit to refine if you want them to be accurate. But I guess the easiest thing to do is to try to base it on some comparable existing information that you have. Ideally, it's your own business. So if you can look at historics, or as soon as you start selling, to kind of keep track of that so you can make educated guesses on what's going to come next, that'll be useful. But if not, then it's just industry research that will help you inform just best guesses. The most important thing we've learned with projections is to really be clear about what the assumptions are that you're making. And because the assumptions are always going to be there, but if you are able to articulate clearly what those are, and ideally have them in your spreadsheet either highlighted or pulled out so you can easily toggle them, it'll give you a lot better ability as you learn more to kind of adapt your projections so that they're accurate. Cool.
Excuse me, I was in mute and I lost my window. So we have a question here. Do you have experience with premium products selling on an inverse demand curve where unit volume increases as the price goes up? That's lucky. Tell me that formula.
Oh,
that sounds awesome.
Unit volume increases as price goes up. I don't have experience with that. It sounds like an interesting situation for sure. And it sounds like, yeah, you'd want to get into that higher volume fast. So I'm sorry, I can't speak to that, but
yeah, I don't have an answer either. But if somebody does, maybe we can also ask this to Caroline offline to see what she thinks about that. Mm-hmm. Somebody is asking, what is the best method to raise prices after 15 years with the same pricing? Costs have gone up, so time to make a change.
Yeah, I think just to echo what we previously said, it's just the communication of that, why you're doing it, and giving people some time so that they can plan for it. Ideally, some time and like an opportunity to buy at the existing price before the price changes hit. And then ideally, it's not a huge hike, but rather a step. And if you need to make a huge hike, figuring out how to do that in stages so that your customers can adapt with you.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, definitely, especially if you have already been established for a while, that communication is really the key for any change that you do. I want to share with you something that one of our mentors shared, Rachel, and this is regarding to pricing. You'll know if your prices are too high if you see sales stop or slow after you increase those prices. Additionally, this is a great reason not to build your business by being the lowest cost offering out there. What other differentiators does your business offer? Why should people buy your product or service and build value that way? which will allow you to have more flexibility on price increases. It's tough to increase prices if people only go to you because you are the cheapest option. So give people a reason to support you and to continue to do business for you.
And the other thing with, I would want to triple underline that last part about the last sentence, it's tough to increase prices if people only go to you because you're the cheapest option. You might be able to be the cheapest option in a very localized small scenario, but generally if the business grows and you become competitive against whoever the big players are in your industry, their purchasing power and economies of scale is going to be often really challenging to compete with unless you have a lot of money going in. So I think competing for price when we're small businesses is often, I think is a common strategy, but I think it's kind of short-sighted. It works for a little while, but often once you get beyond the kind of initial pool that you're selling into, it becomes a barrier.
Good, let me see. So it seems like we just have a lot of comments here. I think we have room for one more question. Feel free to just unmute yourself and ask that question. So the first one to do it wins. Sorry, question just came up. Would you advertise the price increase?
I would communicate it. I would not develop an ad campaign to say we're increasing prices. Maybe the reverse, like say maybe like if prices were going up, to say there's like a temporary 10% discount, but I would certainly not broadcast and put money into letting people know that we're increasing prices.
And one last one. The average price increase in percentage. I'm not sure about that. I think it all depends on your cost and what you need to be earning, but any insights you have on that, Raj?
Well, just not to make the jumps too extreme. I think the more you can do to smooth it, but there's kind of a balance. You don't want to be like every month increasing price by a little bit, but rather like maybe 1 or 2 steps that are not huge ones. We settled on 10% for ourselves, which was a pretty big jump in some cases, but not all. But I think it really, as Ani's saying, depends on your product and your market.
Okay, guys, so I'm going to share my screen to close it up for today. We're going to try to actually be done by 10:30, and that is one of my main tasks throughout this program. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to talk a little bit about next week. So next week, we are going to have Jill Nelson, and she's the founder of Ruby.com. And she is currently a private investor. She grew her business in a very amazing way. And she has a very interesting method of discovering your customer, which is, a very essential thing on your business. So if you wanna take a shot at it, and if you haven't done it before, just draft your customer persona, describe this person. What does it look like? What age do they have? Where do they live? But most importantly, what is their lifestyle? Just do this as an exercise. It doesn't have to be something super elaborate, but bringing that information with you to this session, I think would allow you to absorb more of the information that she has for you in order to continue to develop who your customer is. Because this is a process of discovery that it's eternal. It's gonna last as long as your business lasts. So it's important to keep an eye on that. We're gonna connect again at 9 a.m. and her mentor hour is gonna be on Friday at noon, the Friday of next week. With that, I think we're pretty much done, you guys. I thought that was gonna take me a little longer, but no, never mind. So if you have any more questions, bring them up. We are pretty much ready to go. You guys are welcome to stay in and network for a little bit. You're not required to. And again, if you cannot be present on the mentor hour. It is going to be recorded. We are going to share it with you. And if you have questions that you would like to ask, please let us know. Is there any of you mentors that would like to share something with the audience? You don't have to either. Just giving you the floor if you would like to say something.
Ani, I just wanted to, can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can
So-
hear you.
I just wanted to say, if there's anybody has any more questions about service-based businesses, I could try to help answer that. I might have a different point of view than other mentors, but I know like there's been a lot of questions on that. And Raj said he didn't have a lot of insight on that, but I do run a service-based business. So I could try to help answer that.
Awesome, guys, this is Robert Steck. He is one of our in-kind sponsors. He owns Ruby Porter Marketing and Design. And yeah, we're very thankful that you are here. And you guys take him up on that. I am gonna look up for the link to the homework and I'm gonna share it right here on the chat. I will send you a follow-up email so you have that information available.
And I just want to throw in one thing that I'll just share from my own experience. It's often like hearing these kinds of presentations, it really is the act of actually doing it, like for yourself, for your business, where it becomes real and often jogs more questions. So should that happen for you on anything I shared, please do reach out. I don't know if I put my email address, but maybe Ani, if you can share this as well. It's just raj@youngmountaineer.com. I'd be happy to chat with you all about things that come up as you kind of get deeper into the details and how it applies to your own business.
Just a reminder, we can continue these conversations on the private Facebook group. You guys can leave videos there, make posts, we can add comments. So feel free to use that resource.
Awesome, thank you so much. I just found the link to the homework. And please remember, this is posted on the Facebook group and this will also be sent out to you on an email. Thank you, everybody.
All right, rock on, folks. Good luck.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Mahalo.
Great rest of the week.
Thanks,
Raj.
everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
So Nate, I think we can stop the recording at this point.